So we recently had the beta weekend for Dune Awakening, and based upon the information we got from this and how many players were actually playing, I think we get a bit more of a look at how popular Dune Awakening may be on launch, and I think it's pointing towards this game being a pretty big success on launch, and then we'll have to see how well it is at keeping those players as we continue to get further updates after launch. Now, a few pieces of information before we get into the specific numbers. This was only a weekend beta, so it only lasts for a few days, meaning quite a lot of people probably weren't interested in playing this much. Pretty much everybody I know I'm going to be playing with when the game actually launches weren't playing on this beta weekend. I didn't actually play for super long either. I just wanted to test some things, so I wasn't like playing it a ton of time to progress it. And this wasn't an open beta. And it was originally only supposed to be invite only, so you could sign up on their website or in Steam and they'd randomly invite waves of people, or they were giving away a bunch of keys through live streams, or they give a bunch of streamers a bunch of keys to give away as well. But pretty much the day of the launch, they also did announce that anybody that pre-orders the game would also instantly get access to this, so that also included pre-orders. But again, them announcing that so late and it being such a short beta, a lot of people who I already know are going to be playing the game weren't playing this. But with all of that being said, this beta weekend got a concurrent player count on Steam, 37,889. Now keep in mind, that's peak concurrent. That means that just that day, there was probably 100,000 or more unique players playing during that day. There was actually probably quite a lot more than that, but that's also hard to tell because it wasn't an open beta, and because we actually saw a lot of people were still wanting codes who couldn't get any codes, that this might actually be a higher percent of people who are actually playing during the weekend than would normally be the case when looking at concurrence of fully released games. But an almost 38,000 concurrent player base is actually still a lot of people. If the game on launch could keep even like half of that concurrent, that's actually a very healthy player base. I know a lot of people think if your game doesn't have like 100,000 plus concurrents that it's a dead game or something. That's not the case at all. Getting like say 18,000 concurrent players every single day is just hundreds and hundreds of thousands of players monthly, and that is still a lot of players. So based upon just this number, with it being not even an open beta, with a lot of people not playing it because it was only a weekend beta, and with only having concurrent numbers, this is quite a lot of people trying out Dune Awakening, and I think the launch is going to be significantly bigger. Now, in a previous video of mine, I theorized that we would be getting 100,000 or maybe a little bit over 100,000 concurrents on launch day. And based upon these numbers, I think that may be a bit higher, but there's one thing that kind of throws a wrench into getting crazy high concurrent numbers for Dune Awakening, and that's their early access. So if you buy any of the higher tier versions of Dune Awakening, so there's a normal version, then the two more expensive versions, if you buy anything but the normal version, you also get a 5-day head start where you can play the game 5 days early of anybody who buys just the base version. Now keep in mind, this 5 days of early gameplay is going to be on separate servers. They are also going to be opening up fresh start servers after those 5 days. So if you're somebody that only wants to get the base game, you don't have to go into servers with people that have already had 5 days to progress. You can just join into the fresh start servers. But that means they're splitting up the hype of this game. There's going to be a really big launch on the 5-day early access. Then there will be an even bigger concurrent after that 5 days of early access, when all the people that just buy the base version also get into the game. But that generally means they're going to hit a lower concurrent player count than they would if there wasn't the 5 days of early access you can purchase. But based upon these numbers, I would not be surprised if Dune Awakening gets up to like 150 to 200,000 concurrent players within that first launch week, because again, I think the highest concurrent is going to be after those 5 days, after everybody who buys a normal version gets into the game. Whatever is the next probably Saturday after that is probably going to be the highest concurrent, and I would not be surprised if the game gets 200,000 concurrent players. And something I went over in my previous video is that gaming is just a lot more trendy in general. So we've seen that specifically with Steam, where a lot of newer Steam games that have some hype around them get crazy high concurrence and just lose a ridiculous amount of players very quickly, because gaming is just now so trendy that a bunch of people that probably wouldn't normally want to play that genre are just picking up a game just because it's kind of the new trendy thing to do. And games are generally losing more of their player base than they used to quickly, but that's just because the concurrent numbers are so inflated these days. So I'd very much not be surprised with 200,000 concurrent. But the really big question is how big of a player base can they consistently keep? Because this is a live service game, and that's the main thing that matters. The peaks are really cool, especially for a game that is a box cost, but what really matters for the longevity and health of live service games are how many players they can consistently keep. And that will be really determined on how much endgame Dune Awakening has on launch and how quickly they will be getting out more content and how good that future content is going to be. Now, I will say that survival games are generally really sticky once they get a core player base, and you'll usually see lots of survival games after like a month or a couple months. That 24-hour concurrent peak that they usually get, they're usually very sticky with that. The core player base of a specific survival game is usually quite hardcore, since survival games are generally much more hardcore games. So you'll usually see it be pretty consistent after the first couple months. And I think the first week or two, we will actually see not a big drop off of players at all, because first off, the game's super grindy. A lot of people are going to want to at least get to the end game and be able to go to the deep desert. And a lot of people aren't going to be logging off because they don't want to log off of their like Haga Basin instance and then try to log back on, and then they have to get put in a queue for a while. Even though I don't think that's going to be a massive issue, I think a lot of people are just going to keep themselves online just because they're probably used to survival games or other MMO type games having server queues on launch, so they don't want to get like disconnected or kicked out and have to sit in a queue. And based upon a lot of the opinions I was seeing around this weekend beta, it seems a lot of people, at least people who are interested in the game and in the survival genre in general, seem to be pretty excited for this game. I think it was much more positive than it was negative. Now, I know they also held this kind of streamer event that showed off a few bugs, so a wider mainstream audience may be a bit more negative on the game because survival games are already kind of a hardcore niche genre. MMOs are also a bit more of a hardcore niche genre, and then just showing it off with all these massive streamers and seeing some pre-launch bugs, some people will get the wrong idea. But I think that people who are already interested in this game, who would be interested in this, were generally a lot more positive than negative, and I think that's really going to help the game on launch and the future of the game in general. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.